Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I think we're missing Javier here. Hey, Steve, how are you?
Good morning, Lalo. Nice to see you.
Same here. So, hey, welcome, everyone. I guess we're trying to get Javier, one of our other guests or co-hosts here, to come on. But while we do that, hey, well, thanks for joining. I mean, Steve, we've been talking about trying to do this for a long time. um, I'm glad that we are able to put it together and bring all the different aspects of logistics and shipping and ocean and trade all together in this joint. I don't even know what you want to call this. What do you want to call this? A live cast, a webcast?
I think it's the Mount Rushmore, I was going to say the Mount Cargamore of podcasting. Just call it like it is. I think, you bring up a really interesting topic. I met you last year at TPM,
Yes.
and we had a nice talk, and I did a lot of studies, and I think there's over 500,000 people on LinkedIn that have the word trade or logistics or supply chain in their title. And it's really interesting when you look at people that have stepped up to the plate, like you and I and our guest Javier. He's one of the best as well. And here he is. Oh, he's in and out. But the point I'm trying to make is that out of the 500,000 or so people, engaged in supply chain logistics, ocean freight, trade, customs, I have to say that I feel maybe 100, 200 of those people out of 500,000 are active podcasters, webcasters, putting themselves out there with content. Maybe 100 or 200 is low. But you see where I'm going with it, though. It's like, I think that when you do what we do, right, you put yourself out there. And now, again, I realize maybe some people can't do that, right, because they work for a company. And so they have to be a little bit limited in maybe what they can say or how they can project their own personal thoughts. But you produced an excellent platform here that we're all engaged in, to promote the industry and to promote, our own specializations. So I think we've got here through an interesting journey. I think you'd agree with me, and I also think that we're in kind of rarefied air, that we're privileged to be able to be part of this great scheme and logistics, trade, and supply chain. Where not many. It's kind of rarefied air. If that makes sense.
Right, right. No, I understand. Yeah, that is. I don't know how you came up with those stats or numbers, and you found that many podcasters in our industry. That's interesting because I always wondered as well. Because I do see some um, shows or content creators, let's call it, in the industry that do that, and but I guess a lot of them could be also like yourself, right? You don't have a formal show that you go out and put out every week like we do here at Simply Trade, but would you consider those also part of that group?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting mix. There are so many incredible, talented people that have podcasting and do that as a standalone. I think we have Javier in. Hi,
Yeah.
Javier.
Hola.
Hey, Javier.
And talking about people that go right up to the top of the mountain, Javier is definitely one of them. I can't wait to hear more about his incredible Seven Peaks challenge. But to answer your question, Lalo, I think that it's really interesting what you say. Like last year, I went to TPM as under my Ocean Freight TV branding, kind of like my media branding.
Right.
And this year, I'm going to TPM more as Ocean Audit. Steve Ferreira, the expert in freight recovery. So
Well,
I think it depends on what hat you wear and how you kind of monetize, your own business. There are great, folks out there, Sarah and Blythe. I can name a whole bunch of them, that have done very, very well, monetizing, full-time podcasting, right? And I'm
right.
jealous. I think it's great, and I think when you can fit it into your professional life, like Javier has done, and I've done, and you've done to a large extent as well, it makes it even more all that sweet, right? Because we don't have to, per se, right, necessarily live and die off of the media exposure. It's just great for a calling card, right? And I think Javier, you've been able to use that really well. I've seen you explode in the 2 years I've known you.
I
Yeah,
have.
you have a tremendous amount of content creation that you put out there, Javier, and it's engaging. That's the cool thing about it.
I make it personable. I want people to know that the people that deal with me, that I'm a real human. Like I live the normal life. Like I'm surrounded by these LA fires, and I got a lot of people reaching out to me. But I wanted to thank everyone for their kind thoughts. The work isn't done here yet. Malibu's lost, Palisades lost. If there's something if we can do collectively as a whole, if we wanted to do maybe a food drive. A GoFundMe page for some of these people. It's so sad to see. I mean, LA got destroyed. Anywho, make it personable.
Yeah, speaking of which, and how has that affected like any of the ports or any of the commerce or traffic in that area?
And when it first started last week, it was pretty bad. I think now there's so many homes burned, people's lives are destroyed. I think the majority, I think with I'd say 30% of the people who live in that area work in the logistics transportation department, and they're having to look for homes. It's kind of tough, you know. So I'm thinking that maybe production might slow down just a little bit, but I think we'll pick up by TPM.
And I guess it because of the port of Long Beach being so south, it's really not technically is not affected, right? But it's affected because of the manpower.
Yes, the manpower. That's what's taking a toll, but we'll survive. We'll make it. I will survive. Woo! So Lalo, I wanted to talk about a couple of topics here, and one of the main ones is the if it's okay, Lalo, did you introduce yourself?
No, well, we all did. We all did. I mean, that's I'm sort of. I guess I'm hoping people will know who I am. I mean, I guess that's being I have that's being egomaniac, but so I'm just my name is Lalo Solorzano, and I'm from Global Training Center, as you can see from right here. But we have this little podcast called Simply Trade that we have several thousand listeners every month that come and listen to our take on trade and. We try to keep it fun and everything. We I do have a co-host named Andy, which you met, Javier, and Steve did too over at TPM last year. He's normally wearing a cowboy hat, like you are, Javier. I think you and Andy were the only ones wearing cowboy hats in all of Long Beach
And
that that
and it's
that
coming
day.
at this TPM too. So Steve, bring your Stetson.
Well, listen, I got to get you on the golf course first, and then we'll talk about Stetsons.
Ah, touche.
So but anyway, so yeah, that's what we do, and just provide education for anybody who's importing exporting that need to know about trade. So and I guess Steve, if you want to do yourself also, and then we'll
Oh,
we'll have
sure.
Javier.
You're so kind to have me. I want to thank the whole audience that Lalo has and my audience as well, and Javier's. I think it's great that we're all here today. I made a joke that this is like Mount Cargomore. Three really interesting dudes talking about a lot of things. But for my part, I'm Steve Ferreira. I'm CEO of Ocean Audit, a global ocean freight and logistics refund recovery company. I specialize in getting overcharges and recoveries on all types of charges related to the ocean freight detention demurrage environment. And I'm privileged to have at this point 23 of the Fortune 100 as clients. And I guess my main mantra is that I do everything on contingency. I never charge a client for anything unless I don't produce a refund. So clients love me because I'm able to use my 40,000 outlier hours kind of as an art and a science to get the outlying refunds that other audits might have missed. So kind of a one-man solopreneur. That's the way I like it. And it's very similar to my mountain climbing friend, Javier, who I'll introduce next. Javier?
Steve, I love your graphics in the background. Look, I keep saying, Steve, watch out for the train.
That's your
Watch
train,
out for
baby.
the refund. um,
You got to hop on it. Okay. Tell
all
us
right,
about
let's go.
yourself.
Let's do the Steve trade. So my name's Javier Vera. I just started with Top Lift North America. Top Lift North America is the distributor for the Ferrari container handler and the counterbalance forklifts. I am the director for West Coast Business Development. Um, One of my main things is to get the market share out here and get the company known. So I'm doing everything possible to make that happen. And I'm on a quest to do the seven summits of the world. Those are the seven highest peaks in every continent. Last year, 2023, was it 2023? I did Kilimanjaro. A lot of people do know that because I promote that a lot on my LinkedIn. this February, which is in about 3 weeks, I'm taking off to do Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain outside the Himalayas. That's 22,840 feet. And as you can see here, all my world travels are on my wall. I've done 73 countries, and the goal is to do 100. And that's who Javier is.
Javier, I got to tell you something. I've seen a lot of videos. I've seen a lot of content producers, but you really stand out, and I'll tell you why. Um, you put out something a few weeks ago. I don't remember exactly when, but you were actually working out, and you were actually talking coherently in a heavy, intensive workout. I just can't believe you. How can you mind focus like that? That's amazing.
You know what it is? It's to do these mountains, you have to train. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to do the mountain." Actually, some of the expedition leaders won't even allow you on the mountain unless they see you do certain peaks. So I haven't stopped training. I train every day. I sometimes in the rain, in the heat, I have to go up there and I put on a 30-pound backpack. So that gets my stamina up. And since I haven't stopped going to the gym, boxing, jump rope, weightlifting, cardio, you gotta get up and do something because our body is our temple. Without this, you can wither away if you just sit around doing nothing. The weight comes, and then with that weight, it's so difficult to move around. So thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about politics, Javier? I think you would be an incredible candidate for an agent of change. I mean, when I first met you, it's like I'm thinking, who's this guy? And then 5 minutes later, I'm your best friend. I mean,
Yeah, you
you're
were.
so personal.
Steve, you nailed it. Once you meet me within 5 minutes when we start talking, we're gonna become friends for life. Steve, you and I are gonna get friends. Look, I love the fact that we're doing this because we cover the East Coast with Steve, we cover the Gulf region with Lalo, and then the West Coast with Javier. Boom, the trifecta.
That's why I got the three wise men, I guess,
Yeah,
for lack
my
of a
Ah,
God.
better word.
I'm reading the
I
note,
wouldn't put
baby.
myself as white. So
So we're
But
good.
it's funny. I was thinking about the fact of how we came together at TPM. I think we all have that in common. And Lalo was so great. You do this really professionally, and my hats off to you. Literally, my hats off to you.
thank you.
And I was thinking about so many talented people at TPM, and here we are now in January, right? We're basically, for all sense of purposes, a month away from TPM or so, March 1st. And, like always, so much on tap to talk about coming up and the big events. And I know there's things that we might want to address today, port strike that was not to be, forward loading of cargo. And I'll kind of start off. I'll tell you one thing I observed just in preparation for today's kind of get together. Washing machines. There was a movie Apollo 13, and we're talking about how Apollo 13, the tragedy that happened, but the resolve, to get Apollo 13 back. And there was a scene in there where Jim Lovell's wife, Jim Lovell was the commander of Apollo 13. Jim Lovell's wife is talking to Jim Lovell's mother, and the mother says, "Are you worried? Don't worry, honey, because if if they had a washing machine that was flying, my Jimmy could land it, right?" So I always think about washing machines and Apollo 13. But the only reason I think about washing machines is that's one of the big items that always gets it's such a high valued item. These very expensive LG or Samsung washing machines. The first thing you think about when you hear washing machines in my book, right? When I start to see them come in so heavy, and I'm monitoring them in the manifesting system on ocean freight. I just looked a few minutes ago. I'm seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of containers, more than normal for washing machines. Obviously, why? Well, the tariffs, right? These will be heavily tariffed and tariffed, excuse me. And so, Lalo, you might have better notes on this than I would, but I think some experts would say that it could add, $100, $200, $250 to a washing machine. So I think the forward loading of cargo is a big story. And I think that's something that, we're seeing more stronger lift volumes right out of Asia pre-Chinese New Year. On top of that, we're seeing cargo that needs to be on-forwarded and before any type of tariffing is taking place. How about some comments on that from the team?
I'm glad you brought that up. I was actually just thinking about that Panama Canal, the whole situation with the Trump administration coming into play. And then I believe Mexico is making a huge push for their infrastructure to create their own logistics supply chain between the Gulf and the Pacific. Um, I think that the world for supply chain is going to change real soon.
Yeah, I think so too. And then, I mean, there's with regards to, and then this is the way I see it. You guys get the stuff to US, and then like my audience and my people make sure that it clears customs and it gets to its endpoint, be it a distribution center, a manufacturing company to further manufacture, et cetera, but they take care of all the duties and taxes and tariffs. So from what we've seen, and I just recently had an episode that I recorded. It should be coming out next week, I think, with this really great law firm and group called Sandler and Travis in Rosenberg, and I had them on there, and we discussed a lot of these, like, what does it mean with trade? I mean, I guess we've been talking about it honestly since Trump got elected. I mean, it honestly, it's just been on the forefront. We see it as a lot of people in trade. We see it as job security. It's going to keep us on our toes and everything. So it's just pretty much gonna allow for the trade person to be back at the table, back at the executive table and talking. I heard this interesting saying the other day that if you're not at the table, then you're part of the menu. So you want to be you want to be at the table. You want to make sure that you are in those conversations, and we teach that a lot. We actually preach that a lot here at with our podcast and with our business that we do training. You have to be involved. You have to create that trade compliance culture. You have to make sure that everybody in the organization, literally from the janitor up to the CEO, we call it from C-suite to C-suite, from the custodial to the CEO, um, to know about trade, even if it's just a hint of what's going on, because usually the trade person is seen as the no person, right? They're the ones that are being seen as the ones that say no to, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, you can, I mean, l- normally it's because they tell us trade after the fact, when the shipment's at the port or at the border, and when it's getting ready to cross, versus having planned it, months in advance, maybe even years in advance, when that product was engineered, and being able to determine, how is this tariff going to affect me? Oh, instead of
Right.
sourcing steel,
Right.
from China, let's go ahead and source it from, some other country, that'll be a lot better, etc. You know what I mean? So it's just things like that. I don't know, were you going to say something, Steve? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, 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 no. I'm just, I'm so into this conversation. It makes sense. I was looking at some other commodities like aluminum and vinyl tiles, and I remember all the way back to the 2017 or 18 Trump tariffs, the original Trump tariffs. I remember when one of the big box retailers just brought in beaucoup loads of vinyl tile, right? Because they had the infrastructure and warehousing to support that. And, vinyl tile, Model X, Model B, Model C, Model D, whether it's black or white or, tan, it doesn't necessarily go out of style. Certain types of tile, vinyl tile, will be around for a long time, right? So if you can front load that, forward load that, and you keep your costs down. I think the problem is more holistic, right? And I think this is why there's so much waste and unnecessary spend, right? That you help your clients with, I help my clients with, and Javier has to obviously be diligent in terms of what kind of spend his company does as well. But I think I have a neighbor in Florida, and he actually came to me at a cocktail party. It was New Year's Eve, and we were talking about these washing machines, and he said, I heard about the Trump tariffs, and he was coming at it from a consumer perspective, right? And he said, well, what should I buy, Steve? What's going to go up? And he was making a joke, other retailer is going to make more money. And it's funny, I always think of a study I did years and years ago for Macy's. We were talking about sweaters, ladies sweaters or something like that. And I thought to myself, well, if their first cost on the sweater is $20, and then the tariff, then they have to increase it to $20.85, right? Do they really do that? Or do they just put it up to $21 or $22? I mean, do they mark it up a little bit more on the first cost and then pass that on to the consumer? Do they subsidize it? So, it's a very slippery slope, right, in terms of how each individual manufacturer, retailer, wholesaler, treats imported product. And I think that's part of the problem is that, like, I talked to another major retailer not too long ago, and he or she was telling me that they're increasing their loading 4 to 7 times more this period, in part due to the early Chinese New Year and also because of the potentiality of the tariffs, right? And so it's a tough nut, right? Because you can't take that and tell, in other words, if you have a vertical and say, I don't know, I'm just making this up, the consumer goods industry, right? What's good for Colgate is not necessarily good for Procter and Gamble, right? Two very similar products, but two different philosophies potentially. And so, when we guys, go, and gals, go and work with these companies, we have to remember whether we're an ocean freight vendor, a freight auditor, a trade compliance guy, a manufacturer, a distributor, what's the problem that they have, and what needs to be solved. And I got to be honest with you, from my chair, there are tremendous problems because, Lalo, I mentioned to you earlier about I did a study on logistics and supply chain professionals on LinkedIn, and I said that there were 500,000 of them. There's one more part of the study that's really important, and this is a couple of years old, so forgive me with, I'm a little loose here on my numbers. But if there were 500,000 people that have that kind of title with them, my results showed that over 12 or 15% of them were in their roles less than 2 years, right? So that tells me that fundamentally there's a lot of education that needs to be done. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that you don't hear much about, right? Is everyone wants and wants to pitch, but how do you educate and solve a problem? And then you come across more as a kind of a content or world-class leader or expert, right? And I think that's the thing I try to do at Ocean Audit is I don't try to say, hey, let me come in and I'll get you $1 million refund. I talk about the fact of how that came to be. And so I think it's reframing. Does that make sense?
It does.
It does.
We touching on those tariffs and the supply chain, we kind of averted a huge ordeal, supply chain blockage here in a couple days ago with the ILA strike. If it wasn't for a deal being reached, I think we would have seen some massive catastrophic supply chain issues that would have hit the entire world. um, I think the dock workers reached a tentative deal that just, you know, I think it's a new 6-year contract that they have, and without that, the U.S. economy would have taken a huge toll. Do you guys see an increase in container port usage on the East Coast, West Coast, and the Gulf?
Well, from my perspective, I think what happened is obviously a lot of these retailers, especially with big US DCs on the East Coast, obviously very savvy, and they start to cycle through where the hotspots might be, and so you divert some cargo. I think that now the flows should improve more, but I think the main issue that I wanted to say about that is, and as I said, we've got a lot of great young people in the 20s and 30s that are joining our broadcast and joining the industry, or already are in the industry for 2, 3, 4 years. But they might not know. Like, I remember when I was at Sealand, running the marketing in Asia, in Hong Kong for Sealand back in the 80s. God, I go way back, right? 89, I was in Hong Kong. And I remember, automation was a big hang up at the ports, right? As far as the ILA and the American unions are concerned, automation is a huge stumbling block, right? But you look at something like, the ports in Europe, in Rotterdam, they were so automated even in the 80s, the beginning of automation, right? The Europeans had a special way to do things. And it always stands out to me, when they do surveys. And again, I'm going to delve into my topic on the ports, but you look at, say, the top 100 top 100 airports globally, right? Airports. Very few American airports, make the cut, right? But Shanghai, Singapore, some European airports, they're very customer focused. They're centered around the customer. They create a beautiful environment. It's the same thing with ports, right? Port efficiency. I think LA, Javier, is probably, the best in America, but it probably falls, you know, 20th or 30th on the list. Again, I don't have it in front of me. So I think that we have a very inefficient system. And it's kind of funny, right? I don't know if necessarily the industry wants to make it super efficient. I know that's a little bit of a juxtaposition, but what do you guys think in terms of the creation of, more efficient networks?
I think the dock workers have a lot to say about that because they're so band together as a brotherhood where they're trying to
Right.
fight it. Lalo, do you see that happening in the Gulf?
Well, I mean, I'm not that close to the Gulf in the sense that I'm in the I'm on dry dock here in El Paso. So, but anyway, but what it is that what we have seen, and when we do talk to certain people, we've touched a lot of this on our podcast, and we've tried to address that as well in trying to figure out why or what is it that we um are still kind of even having this discussion in today's environment and world on including automation with especially in something like the ports. I get it, and I'm very I empathize, I guess. Is that the word? I don't know, for the American worker. In fact, I mean, I'd hate to see anybody lose their job. I come from a technology background. Both my wife and I have worked back in the day. We used to call us computer programmers, but now they're software engineers. And my both of my kids are software engineers too, up in California. So we come from a technology background, and I find it hard to believe or understand why we wouldn't automate. Right? I look at the different factors and everything. I understand. I mean, I kind of read through the agreement that they had with the union workers and the you know the
The
ports.
Maritime Alliance?
Yeah, the Maritime Alliance. There's no details, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
there is some hints as to what they might have agreed on. And so the idea is to create jobs, not get rid of jobs, but create jobs that include automation without affecting the existing jobs. I love that idea because I think naturally those port workers that might be doing something, that again, and I don't discredit anything that anyone does because everybody's job is important, but I'm thinking, what if they want to do something different? What do they want to do, like automation and software or technology or whatever? They have a path forward now. You know what I'm saying? Because now there is something available or potentially available. Again, they haven't published anything, any formalities on that. So I can only see that, but I can also see the other side. I mean, earlier this year, if it wasn't this year, was last year, where President Biden was talking about putting in some measures through the FMC and other government organizations in fighting cybersecurity breaches in the ports, more specifically with the cranes. This is really crazy. Who would have ever thought a
Mm,
crane, a mechanical crane that picks up and moves, this big old structure, can get hacked by the Chinese, which they found, excuse me, which they found that they do. They do. They're getting hacked. Turns out, obviously, that all the brains and computers and chips and everything that run that crane, cameras even, that are all Chinese, have a Chinese chip in there or somehow, and that's how they're getting hacked. So so there was an initiative by the U.S. government to try and avoid or prevent that. So I can see that. I can see why there's concerns also, but again, there isn't everything, right? I mean, and why are they trying to ban TikTok? And recently we saw that the Chinese have also managed to infiltrate the iMessage network for iPhones, right? So anyway, it goes on and on. So, but yeah,
But
that's
with
what
this,
I see. Again, I'm not necessarily looking at the physical movements of cargo, coming in and out, like even on the Gulf Coast or anything. But that's just my perspective.
this new agreement actually protects the jobs from ILA, and it establishes a framework like implementing technologies that create more jobs, and at the same time, modernization of the East Coast and Gulf Coast ports. So the ports, so that's going to make things more efficient. Like you said, Steve, making things more efficient, the capacity to move supply chains forward and strong. So we're slowly getting there, and America will get there.
But how does
America.
that
Remember,
compare? How does that compare to the West Coast ports? Are those extremely automated, or are we in the same boat there? Are we going to
Lala,
have the
whenever
same
you say West
argument?
Coast, you gotta throw up the W, man. You gotta go West Coast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're slowly taking initiatives to grow EV, to grow electric, to automation. It's a slow step because there's a internal fight. The administration here in California is really like pushing forward for these new automations, electric, but the people, the frontline workers like myself, we're kind of pushing back on saying, "Hey, slow your roll. We don't have the infrastructure. Peace, relax." So that's where we're at right now.
so, something to consider too. And again, forgive me, I don't mean to bring in the tragedy of the fire, and the current affairs that are happening in California. But sometimes I actually wonder, and I'll go back to that thought in a second. But why I'm bringing this up is that we don't really know what happened when Trump met with Daggett, right, of the East Coast Union, right. There was a lot of secret meetings, and so this kind of has Trump's signature on it a little bit in terms of, I think, how they got it solved. And the union does seem pretty pro-Trump, and I don't know whether or not Trump said, "Hey, let's get you taken care of. The cargo will follow." I don't know what kind of back office deals took place there. So it was a little odd the way that this kind of came down. And the reason I guess I bring that up is I wonder, Javier, if just pie in the sky, if Mayor Bass ended up resigning, or Governor Newsom didn't do well as a result of the fire. I wonder if it changes the dynamics of California politics in a way that might not be so um, eco-friendly. I wonder if there's be anything that would say, "Hey, maybe we need to course correct the way we do things here on a West Coast port." What do you think about that, Javier?
You hit the nail on the head exactly because it showed that they weren't prepared. They were too loose on their policies. Whatever they were doing, they weren't pro. I'm born and raised Los Angeles, so I've seen this city go from good to bad to worse. It's gone to a point where I'm considering moving out. This tragedy in Los Angeles with the fires has really opened the eyes of the people here in California, where change is coming, and change is coming for the best. And I think that we'll get through it. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about that change, right, and you talk about the audience, obviously, that would view a symposium like we're talking today, the international trade folks. I talked. I'm in tune with all my customers on a daily basis, and the focus now is everyone's going through RFPs, RFQs, whatever you want to call them. That kind of ritualistic mating dance of that seems to be so deep seated, in our industries, going out for bid, whatever you want to call it, right? And then the ritualistic dance of sitting down at TPM and not attending the meetings, but doing the back office negotiations. It seems like everyone's mind now is skull blocked on cost savings, focusing on spend, focusing on projections, what will happen in the industry, what won't happen. And it seems like we always kind of come to this, especially at a watershed event like TPM, where there's so much going on globally, the Hamas, the Houthis, the Red Sea opening. I mean, we haven't even broached any of these, issues, and they're so pertinent, right, towards how our friends and clients and customers will be treating 2025. For example, I mean, do any of you gentlemen think that there'll be a black swan event?
No, what's the black swan event?
Well, for example, we have the new illness coming in China that there's some talk about, you know, um, is there any kind of new airborne disease that would be coming in that would potentially harm Americans? Not to say that we'd ever go through a traumatic event like COVID again, but a black swan event would be something that impacts the health, the economy, the welfare of American and global workers. So, and something that would impact the industry. A strike, a prolonged strike would be a black swan
Wow,
event.
wow, the black swan event. You know what? It's so hard to see, but I'm kind of hoping that we avoid any kind of black swan event because man, we took a hit during that pandemic, so it was hard to get back.
Did we
But now
ever?
we're slowly starting to get
Yeah.
back.
It's funny. I been doing some traveling recently, and hitting my share of gas stations because our SUV is a gas guzzler, unfortunately. And I can't. I don't know why I'm even bringing this up, but talking about the pandemic is I'm starting to see like more face masks. I saw a bunch of face masks thrown onto the ground, and I thought to myself, I haven't seen that in a while. Why am I seeing more face masks? So it started me to think, when I travel and I start to see more people protecting themselves, I start to get worried. But I haven't seen it to that extent on the airplanes anymore, and hopefully that anything that shut down an event like TPM in our country and our economy, we won't see that again. But I do worry about little mini events, such as something, God forbid, swelling up in the Middle East, or something to do with Hamas, or any kind of weaponization. I hope Ukraine, Russia solves itself out, so that we're all at peace and we can get back to a more harmonized economy and trade.
I think with the Trump administration coming aboard next week, will I think smooth certain situations down where the canals will be open, the sewers will be flowing correctly. I think the world would see that. Hey, you know what? Let's chill out a little bit. Let's continue our international trade because honestly, we depend on China products. I hate to say it, but I mean, what 30% of the stuff, the containers coming in are from China, or is it more? See, what would you say?
I think one of the stats that I love, and again, I don't remember how it goes precisely, but I remember there were some protesters, where they would talk about, and again, I don't take either side, right? But somebody would say, "Hey, why are you wearing those leather shoes? Why are you wearing that coat that has a leather, embossing on it?" And you should wear natural products. You shouldn't patronize, foreign bought products, right? And then it was really interesting. The person that was being told this turned the tables around to the person that said that. And they said, "Well, where are your shoes from?" Oh, Indonesia. Oh, okay. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So I think that you can't escape the fact that 97% of what's around us, what we touch, breathe, live, work with. I
Mhm.
mean, my microphone, right? I mean, my microphone stand, my clothes, from Italy, right? My blazer, my mics from China, uh, my broadcast equipment, Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, right? So, I mean, we can't live without it. You're absolutely right. And I think that I'm so pro American, right? I love, right, when you talk about the heartland of America. I think some of the best people in the world are like in Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana. I love going through there because it's the salt of the earth. The people are so great and friendly. And I'd love to see more exports, come out of those basin areas. I'd love to see, a ball bearing factory in Nashville, Tennessee, or, an auto parts maker in, Peoria, Illinois. I mean, I'd love to see that. And I think we have a real chance at that,
We
with
do.
the vibrancy of entrepreneurship and economy and Trump. And I think he's going to promote American trade, which
Yeah.
is on the flip side a good thing. So this is actually, we haven't even talked about our export economy, but I think that potentially, and again, I'm not taking sides here, but I think potentially the next 4 years could see, if I was putting on a prognostic hat, a potential rebirth in some entrepreneur opportunities for export economy. And
Yeah.
again, you have to judge that on potential retaliation, right? I mean, if we do go heavy on the import duties, do we potentially get some some gamesmanship on tit for tat, trade retaliation. So I don't know, Lalo, what do you think about some of those obstacles?
Well, one of the things that we discussed or have been talking about a lot lately has been specifically that, like all the different threats and ideas of the Trump administration or incoming administration having to put like 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican products. I mean, or 100% tariffs on BRICS nations. So if you're a member of the BRICS nation, you want to import into the U.S. 100% tariff, or et cetera. There's so many different examples. There's an across the board proposal of I think it was like 15 to 20%, something like that, or 10 to 20% for any imports. And so you just never know. One of the nice things that we have been talking about, and again, it's not my thought or idea or concept at all, but and speaking to, again, reverting back to our friends over at STR, one of the consultants there, she said it really well. She said, Nicole, that's her name. So she said, um, don't follow the bait. In other words, don't go after that. I mean, don't, just because Trump says, he's baiting us, right? He's saying all these if you adjust and fix your business because of that, you may find yourself in a situation where you did it all for nothing, because historically it has happened that um, he may say a lot of things, but he doesn't follow through with them. You know what I mean? It's kind of almost like
Agreed.
having to wait and see, instead of, like she said, instead of following the bait, you just wait and see, because you will find yourself in a situation where you might need to backtrack and undo something that you just did. I know right now there's so many shipments coming in from Canada and Mexico to the US before Monday. They're just coming in like crazy so that they can stockpile here in the US and avoid those duties. I
Yeah.
mean,
Mm,
what might happen with that? I mean, you might there might not even be a tariff. There might be. I know the President Claudia Sheinbaum is really sassy lady, and I love her the way that she's just not sitting back and taking it. She's saying, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, if you do that, etc. So I I mean, to an extent, of course, it could be bad because of us going into the US. I know, like, I know textiles and garments have been affected heavily going into Mexico now. But again, it's someone not sitting down and just letting it happen. It's, again, you just don't know what might
sure.
happen. And don't follow the bait. I guess if anything, my and listen to my episode that's coming out, like I said, in about a week or so. But that was one of the centralized themes, is like, don't follow that bait, because the fact is that it may not happen. And if it does, it's going to be probably like slow. um there's or it, again, it's just, it's not going to happen the way you feel like it might be. So I mean, to answer your question, Steve, that's kind of what I'm seeing. And that's more of like the best approach to this whole thing, coming in. I do love the idea of growing small businesses in the US, making them stronger, etc., by preventing dumping, or it really wouldn't be dumping, but low cost imports and items coming in. But at the same time,
Right.
we do depend, like Javier said, we do depend a lot on imports. I mean, sometimes we just can't manufacture things without imports. I mean, there's just no resources here in the US to be able to fulfill certain things. So
Yeah, I think that one of the things is really super interesting, and I missed this, and I'm glad I just remembered it to say it for the show. But I think something that Trump said the other day, and it almost started as a joke, but it's no joke, right? So we have the Internal Revenue Service, and he just created something called the External Revenue Service to deal
yeah.
almost, for these very topics that we're talking about, right? And so you bring up something called External Revenue Service, and again, I know, I go into the whole thing about who really pays the duties and the tariffs, right? It's is it the American consumer? Trump will say it's the Chinese manufacturers. Now, it's a circular argument we don't have time for today. But I think the point of the matter is that he's creating this Department of External Revenue, which is a big thing for me, right? Because you start to talk about the Doge effect, the Elon effect, and this external revenue. And again, I don't mean to insinuate that it's out of control because he's not even in office yet, but I think these are all signs that we can start to read. And I agree with you, Lalo. It's almost like don't read too much, don't put too much stock into them, right? Because you go off of the beaten path and you enlist in all these things, you may be completely wrong. And that brings me to the last point: is that it's really interesting. You look at the thought leaders in supply chain logistics, trade, ocean freight that I know, my friends and secondary friends and third contacts and connections through LinkedIn. How should I say this? I mean, I know one gentleman, I should say, in particular, probably like anywhere he goes, right? They would hire him, right? His stock is so high, like in terms of kind of a thought guy. But it's kind of weird, right? You look at his background. It's a year here, a year there, a year here, a year and a half there, a year there, 2 years there. And so the gentleman's had, 7 or 8 high-powered jobs at 8 different companies, right? In basically 12, 15 years. And I think it's amazing because I think it goes to show you that I think it proves the point, right? That you hang your hat on one particular bandwidth, right? He might say, well, we're going to go to India now. We're not going to go to Vietnam anymore, or we're going to go to Europe, right? And if it pays off, right, he makes $1 million in bonus, right? And if it doesn't, he's nice try, politely moves over to the next firm that will, that likes his way of thinking. And I think it's cool. I think it's absolutely cool. I think this guy is great. I know this guy really well. But yet, you look at somebody like that, and like my dad always taught me, he said, Steve, don't work for yourself. You need a good job where, they pay your medical bills and insurance, and, 30 years, you get your brass, your gold watch. And wow, I mean, is that your father's or grandfather's day? That just doesn't happen anymore. I look at this guy I'm talking about, in my mind, and I know 5 guys like that, right? That put together their own secret sauce and they bring them successfully to companies. But it's high risk, high reward. I think that none of us in this podcast would be where we are today if we didn't take some risks. And I think that's an important part, right, of our topic today, is that there's a certain bandwidth, a certain modicum that you follow that could be average, but if you're willing to kind of go out of the box and take a flyer on something, it's going to change the world, change your own personal world, your own business world, your own dynamics, your own personal fortune, your company's fortune, the direction of what product flow. Think of it. One bad decision, right, could really screw up a supply chain. So I think we have to think about how fragile it is and how much people that are out there, not that we, the 3 of us have all the answers, but we have some of them, right? Because we're talking here today about them. But I think it's important to be able to use those resources like us, our mutual companies and entities and our own personas to collaborate, right? And I think that this is like, Hillary Clinton said, what, to build a village? Well, this is to build our own kind of global trade village. And so I think we need more of this. Lalo, you've really done a great job putting us together today, but I think this is one. And again, I don't know if that's an original thought that I just had, but I think it's really important when you start to think about how each one of us, in our positions can influence change, right? And the status quo is, that's yesterday's news. I mean, we have to be forward thinking.
And touching on that would be, I think we have some events coming up here that we're all going to be part of. Steve, I'm not sure if you know, but this Thursday is the State of the Port in Long Beach. Of course, we have Manifest coming up in February, TPM in March, IANA, I think it's in September, and then right after that is Break Bulk. So those top 5 are going to be places where we can all collaborate again with each other. So I look forward to seeing everybody there.
And I feel like those are great events to attend. Had it not been for TPM, I wouldn't be on this broadcast with these two guys. I mean, I honestly, you make amazing friends that, in my opinion, are going to last a lifetime. And contacts.
Hmm.
It was like enlightening to see every like different parts of the business that in my case in trade I don't get to see. It complements each other and all that, but it was actually pretty cool. On our
Absolutely.
end here for trade, we have a couple of big events coming up here pretty soon, and there's one coming up in Houston. But that one sold out, so there's no there's no way to get in. But there's another one coming up in Orlando, which is considered one of the biggest ones in our industry. It's called ICPA. I'll be there. Our business will be there. The podcast may be there as well. Just talking to people. So just if any of these events interest, or you'll be there, hey, look for us. Because I know Steve and Javier make a big presence there at TPM. I know it's a very huge event. I don't think I'm making it out this year because so happens that TPM and ICPA I think are back to back, one week after the other. So
Right.
I can't swing it from West Coast to East Coast just like that. I need some time to prepare for that. So, but anyway, that's how that's gonna go down.
Steve,
I'm
am I
a,
going to see you at TPM, Steve?
Oh, listen, I've got a special, I'm bringing a special, last year I had a special trailer. This year is trailer, and my mobile command post it's going to blow you away. I can't give it away what it is. I might start to leak some secrets about what I'm doing at TPM, but I'm doing something that's never been done before at TPM. So
I'm excited.
you can
I'm
count on it.
excited. And where else am I going to see you? You'll be at Diana Brick Bulk.
Myself, no. Last year I did manifest, but this year I'm putting all my eggs in baskets into the TPM and getting all the appointments lined up. I think
Okay.
TPM is really interesting because you can do so much pre-planning, and at the end of the day, everything kind of goes south on you because of people's schedules. I just think TPM is for what it is. I think Lalo is right on the money. I saw Lalo and Andy running around last year, and I was really intrigued. I thought to myself, wow, I'm not the only guy with a camera. And I thought to myself, this is great. This is what we need. We need more of, the proactiveness of outspoken, great content producers and product creators like, Javier and Lalo and his team. I think that, in my personal opinion, just in summarizing, I think where the market's at and where people are at is I think there's a lot of hesitation, a lot of indecisions that are people need to be brought over the edge, right? Okay, what's the next best step for me to do? What's the next best thing I can do as the director of global trade, as the VP of supply chain, as the global VP of logistics? People don't want to make mistakes, right? Because they get judged on that, especially in big corporations, right? Think of it, right? You know, the three of us, at least I appear to be, we have pretty good freedom of what we can say and, go out on a limb, right? Many people are hesitant, right? Because they want to be able to show to their bosses and ownership that, hey, I'm doing the very best thing I can do. So I think that's my message too to the providers that are going to be at TPM. Don't just go there and think you're going to sell, right? You go there and pick a niche, right? I'm so big on niches, like a niche market, like ocean freight auditing. That's all I want to do. I don't want to do parcel auditing or warehouse auditing. Pick a niche and get really good at it, right? And you know, maybe you want to be a content creator. Maybe you want to be able to go to logistics companies and talk about, how you can enhance their profit by 3 cents an item. Maybe you call your new company the 3 cent profitizer. There's so many great opportunities here that all we need is one step forward. And these events like Manifest and TPM and the events that Lalo attends give the three of us that opportunity, to position ourselves to do it ourselves or to meet great people to bring on our shows and help us influence the global community, which I think is one of the reasons why we're here today.
Yeah.
So Lalo, I know we're getting short on the end of our time together, but I wanted to just thank you for what you've done to build your show. Javier, I want to thank you for how you've been such a incredible developing talent on the logistics, supply chain, and trade side. And hopefully, I like to pick up the pieces on my side too, and help clients and friends solve the problems at hand. I think that's what we need to do. We need to band together because listen to us talk today, right? There's a zillion things that are taking place, and how can you be an expert in any one of them? So collaboration is the best modus operandi, and we need more teamwork like the three of us have done today.
Cool. Well, I'm going to sign off by saying, guys, I leave February 7th for Aconcagua. It is a 20-day mountain summit. I return Saturday, March 1st, hopefully, if
Ooh,
everything goes well. And if I could, I wanted to give a quick shout out to my corporate sponsors, Rudy Diaz with Height Logistics, Henry Wilson with Fastlane Transportation, Don Peltier with Paramount Intermodal Systems, and Mr. David St. Ledger with the Modern Group. Lalo?
Awesome.
yay.
Yeah.
We'll see you in time for TPM.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good luck with that, man. I mean, I all I'm doing is running a half marathon at Disneyland this February 2nd. So that's nothing compared to what you're doing. So, but anyway, I enjoy half marathons, and although my physical shape, probably people are thinking that guy runs half marathons. I actually do. But anyway, but thank you all. I guess we are running short on time here, and we've I can't believe we filled in an hour. I mean, we were thinking 30 minutes, right, guys? And here we are an hour later. So thank you all. If
Great.
I mean anybody, reach out to Steve, reach out to Javier, reach out to myself. If you like this, we'll keep on doing it. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's a lot of fun. This isn't even work. I mean, this is fun. This is the fun part, right? I mean, but
Love what
Sure.
you do. You never work a day in your life.
exactly, exactly.
Thank you.
Guys,
Thank you
it
so
was a
much, guys.
pleasure.
Thank you all. Have a good day, and we'll be in touch.
Peace.
Uh-huh. Awesome, guys. We're done.
I think he dropped off.
Yeah, he did drop
Do we
off.
need to
Yeah,
keep
it's okay. It was
we need to
streaming
keep
live, so
Riverside open? Yeah.
no, you can. Let me see, Steve. You're at 55%. So we can do a high quality reproduction of this. It's uploading. You can leave the studio, but if you leave the browser open, it'll continue to upload. So you should be okay after this.
Okay, great. I'll leave